Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out with us this week. As always, we're back with another great episode of practical ministry content for you everyday pastors and leaders, volunteers, folks in the everyday trenches of ministry. Man, we're going to be talking about one of the most important subjects that, man, we all know. We hear about this a lot. We've probably at different times been mentored or have had these conversations, sometimes even in really important seasons of life. We're talking about the impact of ministry on our families, and we're going to be getting into that here in just a moment. But man, I got to check in on my guy Greg. He's if you're not watching us live on the YouTubes, you got like Greg is ready for a safari today. Okay, he's been watching Animal Planet straight. He's jonesing for some Shark Week, and so he's come out today ready for a safari. But anyway, Greg,
Well,
how you doing, man? What's going on over here?
Oh man, trying not to freeze to death because it was gorgeous here last week in the St. Louis Metro land, and like in the high 70s, and then like I got up this morning and it was like 38 degrees and like about froze. So yeah, I had to pull out the long sleeve shirts again and the jacket to kind of make it bearable. And also yesterday was St. Patty's Day, so I gotta have my little green on in honor of the St. Patty's Day.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, a little yeah, you just can't quite let go of the dream.
Yeah, I mean, the dude
I like that.
The dude like banished the snakes, so like I'm in favor.
I don't think that's real. I'm not a historian by any means, but I think it had something to do with potatoes. But I'm not even sure.
The potatoes ran the snakes off, or
I think so.
Did something about potatoes.
What I had heard was that he threw potatoes at snakes, and the snakes left. Now I wasn't there. I don't know, but I have it on good authority. That it was intense. Yeah, I learned something interesting about the Irish flag yesterday.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the three colors of the Irish flag.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Supposedly, the top color represents, I believe, the Catholics of Ireland, and the bottom color represents the Protestants of Ireland, and the white in the middle symbolizes peace between the two.
I think I've heard that before too. I don't know.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's cool if it is.
I mean, I know that we're super famous and everybody like really important listens to us, but so like Keith and Kristen Getty, if you're listening, they're the only famous Irish people I know. So if you're listening, tell us whether or not that's true, because I would love to know if that's true, or did St. Patrick actually really just like go banish all the snakes?
I don't know.
Like either of those things, I'd like to know the answer to.
All I know is the man's a saint. Whether he's canonized or not, the man is a saint. Okay, forever in our hearts. But yeah, I don't. There may be some famous Irish people that I know, but in fear of getting it wrong,
That's right.
I'm just not even going to guess. I'm not sure I want to get good on that road.
Yeah, because they might be Scottish, and that would be terribly problematic for them.
Now
they'd fight you over it.
Yeah, I was going to say
they'd fight you for it.
And Scottish people historically are an angry people. I don't want to. I mean, again, yeah, they're an angry people, man. They got a lot going on. But William Wallace. But anyway, that's good, man. You look good though, man. You look fresh. You look in the spirit of things.
Oh,
I look like I just, per the usual, walked out of a Bass Pro Shop. So I'm fine with that.
Well,
I'm fine with that.
Everybody's
got to have their thing. Yeah.
I mean,
I had a buddy show me a hilarious video the other day where it's like, I only wear two kinds of shoes, cowboy boots and hey dudes. And he said that to me. He's like, oh my gosh, that's you. So, yeah. That's it. That's literally all I wear is cowboy boots or hey dudes. So,
well, there are worse things. You could be wearing Crocs.
Man, listen, we might have to do a whole episode on the sin that is the Croc. So it is. I don't know what's going on out here these days in the streets with these kids and these folks wearing plastic, shoes with holes in them, and then sticking these little gems on them. And I don't know what's going on. Crocs almost went bankrupt for a reason, and I contend it should have happened. But I'm not gonna listen. We can't do this today, Greg. Quit trying to bait me into getting canceled. I'm not gonna do it.
Okay? I'm just trying to get you worked up.
I'm gonna rise above.
Because you are far superior in your conversation when you're a little bit worked up.
So really, he's doing the listeners a service.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we have a good show.
Yep, I'm gonna get him amped up. I'm gonna find all his buttons. I'm gonna press them at once. And 3, 2, 1, record.
Right.
All right, here we go. Anyway,
I'm excited. And all of the buttons in the elevator.
yeah. Oh, it looks like a Christmas tree. But no, man, I'm excited to get in this conversation with you. I mean, I feel like this is one of those conversations where I don't necessarily want to get to that spot where, we're trying to just be super prescriptive. Like, oh, here's the 6 things you do to protect your family ministry. Because I think it looks so different for so many people. I mean, I think the reality for most folks in ministry is the level of involvement that your family has is going to look very different church to church, and even in your ministry career, so to speak. Like if you do end up serving at a handful of churches throughout your calling into the pastorate or into ministry, different churches have different demands, but I think it'd be kind of cool to kind of touch on some of those more cliche, the more stereotypical, and I to some degree, I mean, they're cliche and stereotypical for a reason because they were that way for a long time. Yeah. But in your experience, what are some of those things that you've heard about, ministry and the responsibility of the pastor coming or the church leader coming, and what's the expectation on their family? Can you think through any of those particular stereotypes or kind of cliches that have been around for you and your tradition?
Yeah. So probably the big one is, does your wife play the piano?
Yeah, man. That was a big one for a long time.
Does she want to be in charge of preschool?
Oh, yeah.
Or vacation Bible school?
Yep.
Or all of those things?
Yeah. For a long time, it was like that, for sure.
Yeah. And I think, as far as kids go, are they gonna take care of the lawn?
Oh yeah, I knew a guy. That's what he did.
Or they're not gonna tear stuff up, are they?
Right.
Or that the parsonage, that's our house, right?
Oh. Okay, it went from funny to real personal. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Now, in fairness, I've never lived in a parsonage, so
I have. I've lived, in a couple of them. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, man. In that process for a long time. I mean, if you talked, especially, man, in those early days when I was, kind of getting started out in ministry, if you talk to other pastors, one of those things was hey, remember, they're interviewing you. They're not interviewing your spouse. And so it was just always this kind of cagey wisdom of make sure that you make it known out the gate. And I man, I've got so many stories of guys that they would in that interview process kind of come out the gate with that information and almost be somewhat off-putting because they were just so, I think, anxious around wanting to create a healthy environment for their family to come into for ministry, that they would often be drawing some pretty definitive boundaries without even really going down that road. And I've definitely been in seasons where, I think for my wife, there was a little more of an expectation of her to be involved and to serve. And then certainly in environments where that has not been the expectation. And it's just hey man, we're not hiring her, we're hiring you. And maybe love your family. We're glad that they're a part of this. But there's definitely a sense with which your family comes under a microscope. And sure. I think that is true. I mean, you've been able to serve in the same place for a pretty good amount of time now. You at 6-7 years? Is that where you're at?
Yeah, it'll be 7 years next month.
Yeah, so 7 years, and your kids are growing up there. You know,
Mhm.
your wife's, I'm sure, involved to whatever degree that she's comfortable being involved. But I mean, do you feel like your family's come under a microscope here, or do you feel like you've seen that with other
Um,
guys in the same seat?
I've for sure seen it. I don't know that that I've experienced that personally, but I've tried to do a good job of having some of those conversations. Like, I hope I wasn't, too harsh, but I distinctly remember um, both churches that I've served at since being married to have the conversation with the personnel team, with
Yeah,
the pastor, with the church as a whole, of saying, you're hiring me now. My family, we're going to be church members, and so we're going to do things as church members that have zero to do with me being on the staff, being one of the pastors. But know
yeah,
that
for
my
sure.
wife is going to choose what she wants to be involved in and what she doesn't. And so to have any different expectation on her than any other church member is unfair. To just
Yeah, that's
presume that
good.
she's going to, you know, be the secretary or whatever. Now, some churches that works, and that's a good thing. Like, it's what the spouse wants to do, but
Yeah,
to presume that, I think, is dangerous. And as far as my kids go, I'm probably way more um, mindful of the way that my kids act and the potential perception than probably anybody else is. Like, the people at my church genuinely love my kids,
right.
and I'm so grateful for that. And so I'm probably harder on them than the church people are, as far as the fishbowl piece. But I've seen it. I had good friends growing up that, were pastors' kids, and some of the goofiness, and then especially when they did, do something silly that any other kid, it would have been, oh, well, that's just a stupid kid.
Right.
But because they were pastor's kid, it was, exponentially, worse, exponentially a bigger deal, than any other kid in the church. And that's not fair to them either, nor to
No.
the church, really, to put that kind of pressure on the pastor's family. So yeah, I think it's real, but I thankfully have not experienced it to the extreme that, give people nightmares and ticks.
Yeah, and future therapy bills.
That's right.
Yeah, I think on a lot of levels, some of that has changed, right? Like, certainly, the pressure for the spouse to be equally as involved or equally as invested, so you get twice the amount of people for, half the pay,
Right.
and for the kids to be under this extreme microscope. I think a lot of that has changed, as church culture has changed, and I think a lot of that's changed for the better. But I
Right.
think where what I'm still seeing, and particularly like in the realm of social media, when you see a lot of folks that are in that kind of deconstruction space,
Mm-hmm.
in which, that's a whole nother conversation for another episode. But a lot of those that I've seen are former PKs, these
Yeah.
preachers' kids.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen of them is it has less to do with what they experienced themselves firsthand as a result of growing up in a church, but to some degree, and to a large, well, honestly, man, probably to a larger degree, one of the reasons why they're in this place that they are is because they saw how the church treated their dad or their mom.
Right.
And that's really one of the most significant impacts that
Mm-hmm.
ministry can take on your family. Is it's not necessarily the job or the responsibilities, it's how it affects your family. In that, man, there's a big toll that can be taken,
Sure.
and when there's severe conflict, when there's interpersonal issues, when your dad or your mom, who are, actively involved in serving the church, are mistreated,
Mm-hmm.
poorly handled, unjustly fired, like, man, that takes a huge toll. I mean, I think that's such an important distinction to make. I mean, how do you, like, what caution would you give a young guy now who's coming into ministry that's got, a couple of small kids? They're starting out at a church that maybe has a little bit of a history, a little bit of a reputation. But he's young and he's excited and he has vision, and he wants to take his family here and see what God could do with this infusion of enthusiasm. What caution would you give a guy like that, knowing the impact that this type of environment could create on him and its impact to his family?
Yeah. So probably a couple of things. First, I would say try to determine on the front side, realistically, do you see yourself putting down long-term roots at that place?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, I think it's one thing if you're in seminary and you are pastoring a seminary church while in seminary, knowing on both sides, and they know that you're probably only there a couple of years and then you're going on. And there are some churches that's who they are. And that's okay.
Yeah. That's true.
Based on their location to a seminary and their size, that's their ministry. And it really can be that. It's not that the church is bad, that they're difficult, that they're trying to run off pastors, but just they have seen that as their ministry. But if that's not the place that you are, if you're beginning, you're just getting started and you're seeing a church and you're saying, man, am I seeing myself put down long-term roots here if God would let me? Or does this have to be a short-term assignment? And if it is, know that going into it as best you can. Now, you can't know with certainty, but I think if you can see yourself there long-term, then prepare yourself for that and be there for the long haul. If it's going to be a short-term assignment, that can be okay too. But I think it changes the way that you think about things and the way that you respond to things. So that would be my first deal. And I would say plan to be able to stay. I think guys who are way smarter than me, whether it's Brian Croft or guys like Jimmy Scroggins and others, commit to staying 5 years at least.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take that long for it to really become your church. And so if you can commit to that and you can be bought into that, and do what you can to stick it out, I think that's huge. Now, that is the stuff that you can control as far as your thoughts, your commitment, your availability, and those kind of things. The things that you can't account for, the things that you can't control, are the response of the church. And so I would say there are some safeguards that you can put into place to try to help with some of that. I would say one of those big safeguards that you can put into place is, man, if you can find a way for your kids not to be in business session, do that. Like if your church has congregational rule where you have some kind of regular business session where the church makes decisions, and if your kids can not be part of that, especially as they're little, I think that's okay. And it can protect them from some of what they don't understand. When it's not that, hey, they're really upset at dad, but there's just discussion. It's just conversation, but it might feel like some attacks are coming toward dad or mom. Now, I think sometimes there's no way around it, and that really is the case. Not long ago, I was aware of a situation, and I tried to encourage the pastor to not have his family at the session when they knew that his job was going to be called to the floor for a vote.
Holy smokes, dude.
And I just told him, I said, I think it would serve your family well for them not to be present. Yes, your family are church members. Yes, they have a vote, but it's probably not going to change anything. And it's not going to be helpful for them long-term.
Wow.
And so Like if they can like go anywhere or just stay home, do that. And again, that doesn't fix everything, and that may not be right in your situation, but I think there are some safety nets that you can build in when you know that there is conflict coming, or difficulty coming. Finding ways to try to shield your family from some of that, I think, is good, even if by shielding them you aren't deflecting attack toward them because it's coming at you,
Right.
but being able to just keep them from having to see it.
Yeah, it's such a difficult tension to try to help your kids grow up to love the church and appreciate the church and be willing to be patient with the church, because you see the greater value. It's really hard to strike that balance when you're in the middle of being so mistreated by the church.
Yeah.
That's a really, really difficult place to be.
It is. And I think the other thing, and it's hard, and it's something that I have to be careful of. And this is not me like sugarcoating. This is not me, but genuinely, my church is so loving and so caring toward me, and I'm so grateful for that. But just knowing even in just normal conversation, being mindful as my kids are growing up, what conversations I have at home.
Yeah, man. They hear more than we think.
They do. And even if it's not a bad conversation, even if it's a good thing or a difficult thing, but still like a positive thing, being able to say, okay, yeah, I want to tell my wife this, but I need to make sure it's just the two of us. So after the kids have gone to bed, or when we're out running errands, or the kids are out playing, or whatever, being able to try to shield my kids from even those things so that they continue to love the church, even if the difficult thing or the painful thing that I might be talking about and just kind of trying to process out has nothing to do with us or has nothing to do with them, has nothing to do with whether we stay or we go or anything. It's just a ministry thing. How can I protect them? How can I ensure that I don't unintentionally harm their love for the church by a conversation that I'm just having just in passing with my wife?
Yeah, it's the same principle of why we don't often tell certain things to even like super invested church members, because we're trying to protect the integrity of how they see the church and how they see other staff people or how they see other folks in leadership, because we don't want them to end up taking sides or getting jaded. Because like, man, if you've got people at your church you're close to and they're super invested and you share stuff with them, they're going to take your side, like that's just kind of the way it goes. And your family is going to take your side and be among your most, just vivacious supporters.
Yep.
So the temptation here is to be able to understand that, man, when you're in ministry, you do take a lot of shots. Some of them can be warranted. Some of them can be completely unfair, but you have to be super careful on who you talk to and who you share things with in order to protect the integrity of the church in the eyes of those people that we really care about. I love what you're saying, man. I think it's so important, specifically with our kids, because we want them to see the good in the church. Now, we don't want to give them like rose-colored glasses and I think it's good for them to see like, man, there are challenges at times, because it's important to also see our love for the institution of the church above and beyond the people sometimes, because there's a lot of folks, man, that get really hurt by a church. And by a church, what I'm saying is they get hurt by a group of people at a church. And then they leave, they're done. They walk away from ministry, or it really significantly financially impacts their family. And then those kids grow up and they don't like the institution. Yeah. They couldn't separate the two. But I think it's also important from the standpoint of those that are in charge of overseeing staff or overseeing those that are employees of the church, that, man, when you make decisions about someone on your staff, those decisions radically impact not just that staff person, but their entire family. Because having a church job is unlike any other job, particularly if you're like a paid pastoral staff, right? It's not, you don't clock in and clock out and, then you have your community over here. Like your church is your community, right? It's where your wife goes, where your kids go, it's where their friends are, it's where your friends are. It's it's oftentimes, if you're not the lead guy on staff, it's like, well, man, that's where your pastor is. So your pastor's there, your church people are there, your community's there, your friends are there. Your life really centers around that gathering of believers. And when that person leaves or is told to leave, whatever, for good or for bad, man, all of that goes away for the entire family.
Yeah.
In an instant. And that's you talk about an impact on a family. That's a really, really difficult place to be. And sometimes it's a casualty of someone getting let go because of, whatever reason they needed to let go. Sometimes it's because people have to quit because it's the right thing to do. Or sometimes it's because it's very unfair and it's painful. But I think regardless of what happens in the exit of an employee from a church, it's important to consider the family in that process, because they we want to try to do everything we can to protect their view of the church long term, if that makes sense. Like, I think that's such an important caution.
Yeah, it really is. And unfortunately, it's the horror stories that get all of the conversation in the press. And so, yeah, I think it's real. I do think, like you say, I think it's less prevalent than it once was. I still think it's an issue. I still think it's something that the church has to do better at. But I do start to see signs of, at least by and large, positive shifts in the way that churches are thinking about their staff, and trying to provide care for them. And I think part of this goes beyond just like, okay, something really does go sideways and they're about to get fired. Okay, that's one place. But I wonder, and so I'll throw this back to you. I wonder if for PKs who have grown up and there wasn't big fallout as far as, there was no scandal. There was no, they ran dad out or they ran mom off or whatever. There's none of that, but they still have church hurt. Like, how much of that has more to do with unrealistic expectations on dad or on mom to be at everything and not be able to be at vacation and really be on vacation, or whatever, because every pastor has that that unnatural fear of somebody's going to die while I'm on vacation.
Yep.
Like, you just know it.
Yep.
And they're going to call me and they're going to expect that I'm going to come home. And sometimes, that happens, but how often really does that happen? And how often, pastor, if you're honest, were you the only person who could come and do that funeral, or the only person who could come and minister to that family?
Yeah.
Chances are good. The answer is no, unless it was somebody on your staff.
Yeah, I was going to say, barring it's someone super close or someone on staff. But yeah, no, you're right, man.
But there is that on both sides, the unrealistic expectation of, hey, I have to go back and do that funeral, or I have to do this, or I have to do. Well, do you? Can't you block out that 2 weeks and just remind the church, hey, we have other pastors and we have deacons or whatever your structure is, and they're here to care for you. And so if you have a need, those are the people you can call while I'm gone.
Yeah, and that's a great way to love your family too, man, because like if you know that you take that yearly vacation and you haven't spent intentional time trying to build a team or a structure that can allow this place to not only exist but to thrive in your absence, then you're not serving your family well.
Yeah. Or your church.
Yeah, or especially not serving your church well. And so, yeah, we've got to get to that place where we don't blame everything on the institution of like, well, I'm doing the best I can. I'm playing with the cards that I've been dealt. And it's like, well, I mean, no, like if you don't stumble into some of these solutions, you have to build them. Sure. But I think you're hitting at a larger point, which is folks can certainly grow up and have this disdain of the church based on the unrealistic expectations. And so I think part of that is just helping as a leadership team to ensure that we're revisiting what are those boundaries, what are those guidelines, what are those policies we're putting in place in order to ensure that pastors are working enough but aren't working too much.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to, especially if if you've got a guy on your team that's a little more prone toward like hey man, we understand that your salary, we get that. And yeah, you're consistently 44, 45 hours a week. We thank you for that. Sometimes more if something comes up, but it's like, man, it feels like the last few months you've been running like 50, like what's going on? What are you doing that's requiring all this extra time? What can we do to help you? Because I'm sure your family would like to see you an additional 5 hours a week, or I'm sure you'd like to sleep an additional 5 hours or get to the gym or something like that.
Hey,
and so it's just, sorry.
Don't use that 3-letter swear word.
Oh, you know what?
Me.
That's on me. I apologize. I'll go back and I'll bleep that out in post. So we don't want to offend anybody. But mate, you probably want to use that extra 5 hours a week to get to a buffet, Greg. Okay.
Amen.
Where you can really get some work done. But like we've got to be willing to put some of those boundaries in place. And so I think that's what this whole conversation boils down to is, the impact of ministry in our family. Some of it is outside of our control. It just is. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done to continue to remind our kids, remind our family that we love the church in spite of herself, just the way Jesus loves us in spite of ourselves sometimes. We love the church. But in those areas where we can mitigate negative exposure to our families, we do that by setting healthy boundaries. Making sure that we're taking time off or building systems to support while we're not there, making sure that we're communicating well, making sure that our leadership teams are supporting our staff really well, giving them and encouraging them to take time off. And man, I've heard you say this 1,000 times, and I think it's just so true, especially if you're in a situation where you can't give the pastor more money. The one thing you can give him is more time. Yep. Give him more time, demand it. Like, don't you come in here next week, like we'll put a padlock on your door, whatever it takes, all in good fun, of course. But we've got to find ways to think about the next generation that are represented in our staff's families, and how we can go the extra mile for them. That's a great ministry in ways that maybe we don't always consider, because we do see them running around. We do see them there. We know they're there, and we got good relationships and it's fun. It can be lighthearted, but man, wouldn't you like to be said that your church was a part of building generational pastors? Because what an incredible place to minister. You know what I mean? I think these are good considerations and good thoughts to have. I don't know, man. I think this is just such an important conversation that I don't think we can say everything, but I think we can get it started here.
Yeah. And I think that's the hope of conversations like this, is knowing that we won't ever come to exhaust what could be, whether it's the potential pitfalls or the potential safeguards that you can put into place. Because to a certain degree, they're going to be different depending on what your circumstance is,
right,
and what your family looks like, and what your church looks like, and all of those different things. But I think they are consistent conversations that we have to be having, so that we can, look back after 50 years of ministry and be able to say, you know what, not only did I not lose my ministry, but more importantly, I didn't lose my kids. I didn't lose my wife. I didn't lose my family over my ministry.
Man,
and
that's
so
huge.
How are we having those conversations consistently, so that we're mindful, and make adjustments as we go when we need to, instead of looking back and realizing it's been a year since I've taken time away to go just be with my family, or whatever the thing is that you have not been doing. And so having those regular conversations with yourself and with others, I think is super important.
Greg, that is a great word to end on, man. Powerful challenge. I hope that this conversation's been helpful to you, pastor, leader. We'd love for you to get this episode out in front of some other leaders just like you. So make sure you share this episode. You can do that from our Facebook page, from Apple Podcasts. You can do that from Spotify. Make sure you rate and review the show because we're always trying to expand our reach so that we can encourage as many pastors as we can. Again, we're not trying to sell you anything. We don't have a book for you to buy. We're not. Everything on here is just
Yet.
Well, he stuck it in. He said yet. Yeah, those sneakers aren't going to pay for themselves. Okay,
That's right. We're working on our book deal.
Yeah,
Crossways, come on.
Yeah, and I promise you, whatever book we strike up, the first edition will be free. That way, we can't be sued. Okay. You can't get blood from a turnip. Okay. Anyway, I think we've ruined it. All right. That's it. That's all we got. That show's over. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Simplified Church podcast, gang. We love you. We'll see you next week.